The royal road was the pride of the Persian Empire, stretching like a vein of stone and dust across mountains, deserts, and cities. To merchants, it was the lifeline of trade; to soldiers, the backbone of conquest. But to those who dared betray the King of Kings, it was something else entirely. A silent graveyard hidden in plain sight. No markers, no tombs, no prayers. Just stone slabs pressed into the soil, under which bones and dust waited in the darkness. The sun was already sinking low over the city of Susa when the soldiers dragged Ardeshir from the dungeons. His hands were bound with bronze cuffs, the metal rubbing his skin raw. A ragged tunic hung from his shoulders, stiff with dried sweat and blood. He stumbled, his feet catching on the uneven stones. But the grip on his arms kept him moving forward. Every step brought him closer to the road. Not just any part of it, but a place chosen carefully, where caravans passed daily, where the sound of hooves and wheels never stopped. The punishment was designed for shame as much as suffering. His name, once whispered with respect in the court, would be remembered only in disgust. In the marketplace, word had already spread. People left their stalls and hurried to the roadside. Mothers held their children's hands tightly, some shielding young eyes, others letting them watch, as if to say, "This is what happens to those who defy the great king." The smell of spices from the stalls mixed with the sharper scent of dust rising from the crowd's restless shifting. Ardeshir's crime had been whispered in the dark for weeks before it was spoken aloud in the court. He had conspired to pass secrets to the Greeks, bribed by gold and false promises. It was treason of the highest order, and the punishment had been decreed without trial. For the Persians, betrayal was not just against the ruler, it was against the gods who had given the king his divine right. The soldiers halted beside a patch of the royal road where fresh stone had been lifted away. The hole beneath yawned like a dry mouth, deep enough that a man standing inside would see only the boots of those above him. The air that rose from it was cool and smelled faintly of damp earth, the last fresh air the prisoner would ever breathe. A high-ranking official stepped forward, his robe trimmed with gold thread, his expression carved from stone. He read the sentence aloud, his voice carrying over the gathered crowd. For the crime of treachery against the great king and the empire, for the betrayal of trust, and for the spilling of Persian secrets to our enemies, Ardeshir, son of Varkan, shall be buried alive beneath the king's road, that all who pass may know the fate of traitors. There was no pause for pleas. The soldiers forced Ardeshir toward the hole. His bare feet sank into the cool soil at the bottom. From there, the road above looked impossibly far, a circle of sky framed by faces looking down. The crowd leaned closer, their expressions a mix of anger, curiosity, and fear. The official gave a small nod, and the first shovelful of dirt fell. It struck Ardeshir's shoulder and rolled down to his feet. The dust rose in his nostrils, making him cough. More shovels followed, their sound dull and heavy. He shouted then, not for mercy, but for his innocence. His voice carried across the road, sharp and desperate. But the people did not believe him. They turned away, some muttering prayers, others spitting into the dirt. The soldiers did not stop. The sun dipped lower. Its last rays caught the edge of the stone slabs waiting to be replaced over his head. Each load of soil grew heavier, pressing against his legs, then his waist. The earth clung to him like a living thing, swallowing him inch by inch. Above, a caravan was approaching, merchants from Sardis, their wagons heavy with goods. The lead camel snorted, tossing its head, but the driver kept it moving. This was part of the spectacle. The officials wanted the prisoners to hear the rumble of the road one last time, to know that life above would go on while theirs ended below. Ardeshir's breathing grew ragged as the soil reached his chest. He tried to lift his arms, but the weight pinned them. Sweat streamed down his face, mixing with the dirt. His eyes darted wildly, searching the faces above for even a flicker of compassion. He found none. The sound of shovels stopped. A pause hung in the air, heavy as stone. Then came the scraping of the slabs being dragged into place. The first was lowered slowly, blocking part of the sky. Shadows crept over his face. In that moment, the smell of the road filled his senses. The dry, dusty scent of stone worn smooth by countless feet, the faint tang of animal droppings, the metallic hint of iron from the passing weapons. Sounds echoed strangely now. The voices above were muffled, the creak of wagon wheels deeper, almost hollow. The second slab slid into place. Only a thin sliver of light remained, enough to illuminate the panic in his eyes. He shouted again, but the sound came back to him from the dirt walls, swallowed before it reached the surface. The last stone fell, sealing him away. The darkness was complete, the air close and warm from his own breath. He could still hear the caravan passing overhead, the thud of hooves, the rattle of wheels, but it was distant now, as if he were listening from the bottom of a well. He tried to shout once more, but the weight on his chest made the words thin and weak. Above him, the world continued, each step pressing the stones tighter, each cart rolling another layer of silence over his grave. The march back to Susa took days. Ardashir was kept in a wooden cage, bound at the wrist and neck, so that every step of the horse jolted his body. The guards spoke little to him. When they stopped for water, they poured it into his mouth without untying his hands. Like feeding an animal, every hour, he thought of escape, but each time his mind met the same wall. There was no way out. Not now. When the convoy finally entered the city, the noise of the capital assaulted him, vendors shouting, hammers clanging, the shuffle of sandals on sun-baked stone. Yet, above it all, he noticed something stranger, the way people glanced at him and then quickly looked away, whispering. They knew. News of his betrayal had already reached the streets. They brought him before the king's palace, a massive structure of glazed bricks depicting winged bulls and royal processions. Inside, the cool shadows stretched like an oasis, but there was no comfort here. He was dragged into the Hall of Judgment. King Darius sat on his throne, high-backed and carved from a single block of dark cedar. His face was unreadable, but his voice was steady, almost soft, as he addressed Ardashir. Son of Varam, you served your empire. You carried its seal, and yet you sold it to our enemies. Ardashir's throat tightened. But the king's hand rose to silence him. You will not speak. Your words are worthless now. Instead, you will pay the price our ancestors decreed for traitors, and your grave will be the royal road itself, so that all who pass over you will know the cost of betrayal. A ripple of murmurs moved through the court. The royal road, the lifeline of the empire, stretched nearly 2,700 kilometers, connecting Sardis to Susa. Merchants, soldiers, and messengers used it daily. To be buried beneath it was more than death. It was humiliation eternal. The next morning, they marched Ardashir to the site of his burial. It was a long stretch of the royal road, lined with heavy paving stones. A crowd had gathered. Traders with their carts paused. Curious villagers stood at the edges, and children clung to their mothers, sensing the gravity of what they were about to witness. The executioners had already pried up a section of the road, revealing the earth beneath. The pit was narrow, just wide enough for a man's body. The smell of sun-warmed dust rose from it, mixed with a faint odor of sweat and fear. A priest stepped forward, reciting words from the empire's ancient code. His voice was calm, almost ceremonial, as if blessing a wedding instead of condemning a man to the earth. Ardashir felt the rope around his neck loosen, but only so they could strip him of his outer robes, leaving him in a thin linen tunic. His hands were bound again, this time tighter. The executioners guided him into the pit. The walls of packed dirt rose up around him, shutting out the light bit by bit as he was forced down to his knees. He could see the legs of those above, soldiers' sandals, merchants' worn boots, even the fine slippers of a noblewoman who had come to watch. When they began placing the stones back over him, the first thing he felt was the sudden weight of shadow. Then came the sound, the heavy scrape of rock against rock, followed by the muffled thump as each stone settled into place. Air still came through the cracks, but already it was warmer, harder to draw in. Someone in the crowd spat. Another called out, "May the worms eat his tongue before he dies." Laughter followed. Above him, The light narrowed to thin slivers between the stones. He tilted his head back, catching glimpses of sky. Then the last stone slid into place, sealing him in darkness. For the first hours, he screamed. His voice was loud at first, echoing in the small space, but outside, it sounded faint, swallowed by the steady noise of passing travelers. Wheels of carts thudded overhead. Hooves clattered. The ground vibrated with the endless movement of life continuing above his tomb. By the second day, his voice had grown hoarse. His lips cracked from thirst. Every sound from above was like a hammer, each footstep pressing down on the earth, each cart a reminder that the Empire's pulse carried on without him. At night, the road grew quieter, but the silence was worse. He could hear his own breathing, quick and shallow, and the faint rustle of something moving in the dirt. Small insects, worms, things that thrived in darkness. They brushed against his arms, his neck. One crawled across his cheek and into his hair. He tried to shake it off, but the ropes bit into his wrists. Time dissolved into a blur. Hunger gnawed at his stomach until even that pain dulled into emptiness. His mind wandered to his childhood in the hills, to the first time he held a sword, to the day he swore loyalty to the king. The memories felt distant, like they belonged to another man. On the third day, his strength failed. His chest rose and fell slowly. He could still hear the road above, faintly, the rhythmic clop of a horse, the creak of leather harness. Then, for the first time, a cart stopped directly overhead. Voices spoke in a language he didn't know. The ground shifted as they moved on, leaving him alone again. His last thought was not of the king, nor the Empire, nor even his betrayal. It was of the river near his home, the way the water shimmered under the sun. He imagined stepping into it, the current taking him away. The royal road kept pulsing above him, a vein of life in the Empire's body, while below, the earth swallowed the last breath of the man who had dared to betray it. And as centuries passed, the stones above him were replaced and worn. But no one ever knew exactly where his bones lay, only that somewhere along the road, a traitor's grave still slept beneath the feet of the living.